Hi scholars, welcome back to another screencast-o-matic lesson. And this time we're going to look at a PowerPoint on concision. And this week you have a reading that is on the principles of concision. And this PowerPoint accompanies that reading. So make sure that you read that in addition to watching this, because the reading has a lot more examples of what I'm going to show you here today. So we're going to start with a question and a statement about reading and the importance of good writing. Writing is very much power. Good writing is powerful writing. Better writing helps your readers understand your message, and that's critical. That's part of why you're taking this class. It's part of why this class is required in order to continue on with your college education. Now, you build your writing muscles by reading, writing, and revising. So often we just want to jump into the writing part and just get the assignment done or just get it over with. And as you'll read this week in Writing Analytically, that's just not how it works, at least not if you want to develop very high-level writing skills. So you really have to read and write and put in the time to revise. And part of that revision process is developing writing that is much more concise, and we'll talk about what that means. So what is concision, and what is this thing called concision? And you'll hear me mention this, and I've mentioned it to some of you already, over and over and over again this semester, because it's a really key writing skill. Making your writing more concise is super important to creating very high-level writing. So concision is writing that is direct and to the point, much like this slide. Concise writing is also powerful. We build concision by revising our own writing and by workshopping the writing of others. So you'll read your own writing, of course, but you are also in the process of reading other folks' writing, right? That's part of the point of having you post replies to your classmates, is so that they get feedback, but that you can also see how other folks are putting words together. So there are 5 principles of concision, and these are laid out in your reading in much more detail, but I'm going to go through them here in condensed version, and then you can refer to your reading for much more specific, the specific version, and also more examples. So the first principle, and these are principles that you want to practice in revision of your writing, is to delete words that mean little or nothing. And what we mean by that are words like really, very, actually, and the favorite of many of you, basically, right? Because these are all words that they're filler. When we say that something is really scary or very scary, we are just saying that it's scary. There really is no differential level. Something is scary and then really scary, really, really scary, very, very scary. I mean, where does it end, right? When we use the term basically, we're giving ourselves a minute to think. We're giving ourselves a little bit of a cushion to say, well, if you take all things into consideration, blah, 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 it's just fluff. So it doesn't add to the understanding of the words that you're putting together. It doesn't help your reader, or your listener for that matter, understand what you're trying to say. So you want to completely delete really, very, actually, basically, and any words that are in this same family. The second principle is to delete words that repeat the meaning of other words. For example, full and complete, any and all, first and foremost. And I know that some of you are quite fond of the first and foremost, right? And I laugh because this is, student writing is full of first and foremost, and other writing is full of first and foremost. But that's the same thing. Foremost means it's the first thing. It's the most important thing. It's the first thing it's the first point that you want to make. full and complete, it's the same exact thing. In fact, I just did that with what I said. Same exact means the same thing, right? It's redundant. It's repeating. So instead of full and complete, you want, or any and all, first and foremost, think of ways that you can say the same thing. I mean, you could just say first, right? Or you could just say all instead of using both of those words, and that will make your writing more concise. The third principle of concision is to delete words that are implied by other words. What does this mean? Well, here are some examples. Terrible tragedy, true facts, free gift. And certainly in this day and age, we can ask, well, what other kind of facts are there other than true facts? And the other kind of facts, well, if it's a fact, if it's a fact, then it's true by definition. What other kind of tragedy is there? By definition, a tragedy is terrible. There's no such thing as a lovely tragedy or a happy tragedy, right? And if something is a gift, then it's free. If it isn't free, then it's not a gift. The fourth principle of concision is to replace a phrase with a word. So for example, instead of saying or writing exactly the same, you can just use the word identical. Instead of the thing to do before anything else, you can just say first. The reason for, you can just use why. What I've noticed in the responses that were posted is lots of folks like to use the phrase, the reason is because, and really you just need the single word, why. That's all you need. You can read through your writing and see where these things are popping up, and you'll notice that you use a lot of these phrases instead of words quite a bit, and a lot of fluff words quite a bit, and maybe you didn't even know you were doing it. So the last principle of concision is to change negatives to positives or affirmatives. And this one's a little trickier because we like to say what things are not instead of what they are, because it gives us a little bit of distance from the thing. For example, when we say something is not different, like we might say, well, you and I are not so different. What we really mean is that you and I are similar. When we say not often, we mean rarely. So you might say, someone asks you, well, how often do you do this? And you say, not often. Often we say not very often, right? But what we really mean is that we rarely do the thing. And the last, I think, best example is when we say we are not happy or someone is not happy. That's a replacement for unhappy. So we want to stop saying what something isn't, because that's the negative part. We're saying what it isn't. It is not happy, not often, not different. No bueno, right? That's one that we have adopted as a kind of slang term. And shift to using the positive. Tell your reader, tell your viewer what you're trying to say. What is the thing? Use the positive form of it. It's similar, rarely, unhappy. Don't tell us what it isn't. Tell us what it is. Go through your writing and see where you're doing this. So let's do some practice, some quick practice. Here's the first sentence. Poet Gary Soto gave a poetry reading of his work on campus this week. It was actually an excellent performance, in my humble opinion. So we can see right away that we have a number of crazy things happening here. Let me see if the pen will work. So first of all, we've got actually happening here. The pen doesn't seem to be working. That's all right. So here is a replacement sentence. So we want to get rid of actually, and we certainly want to get rid of in my humble opinion, because there's nothing humble about us at this point, right? We are all experts on whatever we're writing. We've either read the thing that we're writing about, or we've done a little bit of research and whatnot. And so you don't need to say, in my humble opinion, because that's just filler. And for most of you, it's a lie. You really aren't humble at all. And that's just sort of the nature of the scholar. So get rid of that, and then we don't need to say poet gave a poetry reading, because if it's a poet, what other kind of reading are they going to give, right? So this is a much better version of the sentence. Gary Soto gave an excellent poetry reading on campus this week. See how much easier, faster, to the point that is? People will understand your meaning and then move on. So another example. The new Great Valley Museum is a pretty big museum on Modesto's campus that is now open in its new home in the Science Community Center on the Modesto Junior College West campus. Well, I'm exhausted just reading that. But you can see the repetition, the redundancy, the things that we can take out. Here's the revised version. First of all, who's your audience? If your audience knows that Modesto Junior College is MJC, just use MJC. So MJC's new Great Valley Museum is now open in the Science Community Center. You don't have to say in its new home. You don't have to say on the College West campus. People can figure that out. You certainly don't have to say pretty big museum, because now we've got museum repeated twice, right? And pretty big, well, how big is pretty big? Is it bigger than a bread box? Is it bigger than, a packet of ketchup? Who knows? But you don't need that, because it makes your sentence quite vague. All right, so here's the challenge sentence. This is an actual sentence from a student piece. In my spare time, I decided to make a super cool video of what it's like to be me for a day. That is 24 hours of my life, and I think it's actually totally cool, both the video and being me. So after I finished cracking up, right, because this is just a hot mess of a sentence, we can see that there's so much redundancy and repetition and just crazy business. We don't need actually, we don't need totally. We've got use of being, which we'll talk about in a second. And the repetition of a day in the life, what it's like to be me for a day, well, that's 24 hours. So that's redundant, right? So look at all of those words this person used, and what they're saying is really this. I made a video about 24 hours of my life. That's it, right? That's all you need, and that's the power of an edited, concise sentence. So finally, a few phrases that I want you to omit from your writing moving forward. I want you to get rid of I think and I feel, because everything you write for this class and every time you do an analytical piece, it is all about what you think and or what you feel. You are the expert. You're the master of these ideas, and so get rid of that and just make direct statements. The reason is because, I run out of breath just with all of that. So just go directly into whatever your ideas are. You don't have to say the reason is because, and that's redundant. That being said, just cross that out and jump into your next idea. And then forms of to be, like being, or just the words to be. Most of the time, particularly at this level of writing, anytime you're using to be, it's either at the end of a sentence or you're using a phrase like the one I just mentioned, that being said, that you absolutely do not need. So you can just delete it from your writing or change it so that it makes more sense. So watch out for forms of to be. So remember, the best writing gets straight to the point. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks, and I look forward to your essays this week. Bye-bye.